I signed the police jurídica. I signed the 12 brigades. And as I opened the door and entered, I knew I had made the right choice. I was a mad woman in absolute heaven. After so much movement and testing and uncertainty, I was in a space where I could create beauty and peace and harmony with my own hands. My design for the living space began with an antique chest I had purchased from Mama Alicia, mi abuela, my adopted grandmother in Primero de Mayo. Mama Alicia sold antiques from her home on the corner, and she embraced me. Sometimes we would dance together in the town square. I brought her cornbread every time I went grocery shopping. She loves cornbread. The chest was carved and ornate. It embodied the warmth I have in my heart for Mexico and its people, and I decided the room would honor that warmth. Have you ever hand-painted a textured wall? Don't. It's painstaking. It is torture, and I loved it. The tile floors already carried earth tones, so I pulled those colors upward into the room. I wanted the apartment to feel connected to the mountains outside my window. Nature outside and nature inside. I wasn't just designing space, I was creating sanctuary. With every brushstroke, I was physically exhibiting essentially the meaning of my life's work. If you declare and then listen, if you set in motion, even when uncertain, especially when you're uncertain, you can manifest the power to create your own reality. But you can't always keep what you create. That summer, things began to change in Primero de Mayo. Well, it is not without a little bit of sadness that I say goodbye to my home of the past 2 years here in Primero de Mayo. Unfortunately, the neighborhood is changing a little bit. There's a lot across the street which people have begun to use as a dump. And I will put up with a number of things for a great apartment, but living across the street from a dump is not one of them. So in the fall of 2024, I decided to go apartment hunting. And I decided to return to my first and favorite colonia, Versailles. I was eventually shown a 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a kitchen to live for. But it didn't have a lot of sunlight, the bathroom was dated, and most important, I couldn't see my mountains. But then it happened again. I had decided not to take the apartment. And I pick up my phone to call the realtor and give my decision. And as I'm dialing, I hear, "Take the apartment. You can teach classes there." Mind you, I was in nesting mode. The return to purpose wasn't even on my radar screen yet. But that's what I heard. And when the agent answered the phone, I said, "I'll take it." So now I'm in double nesting mode. It turned out that once I removed the canvas that had been mounted over the courtyard, the apartment was bathed in afternoon sunlight. And once I Iraqified it, I fell in love with the apartment. It was the perfect Mexican home in the perfect Mexican colonia in the perfect Mexican city. It was December of 2024, and I was on top of the world. And then in January of 2025, my world, the world, turned upside down. By April of 2025, many, if not most, of the equal employment opportunity departments of most federal agencies were paralyzed. They were waiting to see if, when, and where the anti-DEI acts was going to fall. The firm that I work for stopped making payments, and my savings, such as they were, had been invested in creating my beautiful new life. I had learned my lesson about credit in the years following college, so I didn't have any. I was literally facing the prospect of doing something that I declared I would die before I did, and that was giving up my life in Mexico and having to return to the United States and look for work. I have blood family, but no one I could turn to for this. What I did have were hundreds of ascendants, graduates of my cultural empowerment curriculum, The Awakening, scattered throughout the United States. It had been decades since I had been in touch with them, and many of them I had lost touch with completely, but I had to find them. I had to ask for help. My return to purpose had been a spiritual mandate, but now it was literally a matter of survival. The first person I called immediately covered my expenses for April and both of my rents for May. I could breathe because I had listened. Because I had been obedient and taken this apartment, I was immediately in a position to organize a live presentation without scurrying around spending time and energy and money trying to find a teaching venue. I moved quickly. I pulled together a workshop almost entirely from memory and invited a few friends, a few friendlies, and several people I felt were influential within the Puerto Vallarta community. It wasn't polished, but it was real, and it was enough. Enough to introduce the work, enough to demonstrate its impact. And the people who attended that May 30th, 2025 presentation were generous enough to provide testimonials. For the first time, I began to seriously envision transforming Claim Your Power from a single presentation into an online curriculum. I began developing that and praying that I would get a case assignment. But the work didn't come, and neither did the money. So once again, I had to reach out for help. An ascendant who was introduced to my work in 1999 stepped forward. This person and I had remained in contact, so I was able to witness the impact of the work on who they were, how they lived, what they thought, how they thought, even how they raised their children. This person said, I got you. Do what you need to do. I got you for as long as you need me. I accepted gratefully and under the condition that the blessings would be repaid. And this person, this ascendant, kept both roofs over my head, kept my lights on, put food on my table for months, without question, without expectation. I was beyond grateful, and I was even more determined to restore my independence. Claim Your Power had launched online, but because it was developmental, I didn't charge a lot. It was a very small fee, and it didn't go very far. So on June the 9th of 2025, I applied for Social Security, and my application confirmation said that it was going to be processed in 30 days. By this time, it was July in Puerto Vallarta, and the heat and the humidity had become unbearable. So I returned to Leon and continued to work on Claim Your Power. I was working 18 to 20 hours a day and running on fumes, trying to hold on to the life that I had built. And then on July 29th, 2025, I got a call that indicated I may have already lost it. My upstairs neighbor in Vallarta called to tell me that both our apartments had been burglarized. Everything had been violated. But here's the thing. My upstairs neighbor's apartment had been ransacked too. Several things stolen, all of their jewelry gone. But in my apartment, the only thing actually missing was a red plastic cup in which I kept my loose change. Jewelry, equipment, televisions, all present and accounted for. I had to ask myself the all-important question: why? I messaged the enrollees in the course, explained what happened, and canceled the course. Of course, I refunded their money. The owner of the apartment in PV hadn't done a thing to secure the building. I mean, I had to pay out of pocket to replace the lock on my door and on the front gate. Then finally, some good news. I got a case assignment, and I immediately started looking for another apartment. And I found one. And it was in my other beloved colonia, Las Aurelias. Obviously, my new priority was what? Security. And this property more than answered my prayers. The front gate is keyless, completely electronic, and there's camera surveillance everywhere. And each apartment has its own security system. The apartment was enormous. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, with meters and meters of storage space and a view of the mountains from the primary bedroom. The owners were incredible people. I told them about my situation. They agreed to hold the apartment for me for a week. I told them my age, I showed them my residency, and told them, you're getting a tenant for life, so can we talk about the rent? They lowered the rent by 2,000 pesos. All my life, I have been blessed when it comes to finding a house or an apartment, but the angels were working overtime right through here. I got started on my case, moved it forward a little, then I called my firm and explained what happened. I asked them to give me an advance on the case, and they granted it. I had worked for this firm since 2002, and consistently throughout that entire time, any payment that was processed took 2 business days to show up in my account. I got the email that my payment was processed the morning of Wednesday, August the 15th. And I expected it to arrive the morning of Friday, August the 15th, in time to pay the security deposit and my first month's rent. But it didn't, for the first time in 24 years. I told the owners what happened, but understandably, their patience was running thin. They told me, they'd love to have me, but they were going to start showing the apartment again and to just get back to them as soon as I could, which I did. That Monday morning, I messaged them right away that the payment had come through, and they messaged me back that the apartment had been rented over the weekend. Why? So all this time, I had been checking on my Social Security application. I would call twice a week, and I'd make 2 calls on each of those days. If you don't get an answer that you like when you call a customer service representative, hang up and call again, because everything depends on who answers your call. But the week of August 18th, I hit the jackpot. The administration had fired so many federal employees. Everybody's applying for Social Security. So they took field officers and put them on customer service. And I got one of those field officers. And because she had greater access to records, she was able to tell me exactly what was happening. She told me that my application had been received on June the 9th and had not been touched since. Not reviewed, not processed, not touched. She sent some kind of message to the Maryland office telling them to take a look at it, but I had always had my concerns that I wouldn't even be approved. So I stopped calling the Social Security Administration and went on to Plan B, whatever that was going to be. I had to move some things around. Step one was to reorganize the apartment in PV so that I could sublet it for the remainder of my lease and still keep it. I marketed it on Facebook and immediately got a hit from a woman who wanted it from October through December. Perfect. Now all I needed was for the owner to take responsibility for securing the place, but she wouldn't. This was her only source of income, so she wouldn't even authorize me to do it and then deduct the cost from the rent. I couldn't sublet it, not if it wasn't secure. By the evening of August 31st, I was exhausted, mentally, physically, spiritually, every kind of lead. It was 1,000,000 degrees outside, Fahrenheit, with 1,000% humidity. And remember now, I wasn't supposed to be there. So I sat under the air conditioner on my living room sofa and went into meditation, and I asked the universe, please give me a sign. Give me a sign about what am I supposed to do. Am I supposed to give this place up, or should I keep it? I came out of meditation and got up, turned off the AC, turned off the light to go to bed, but the room was still illuminated. So I go over to the window and I look out, and there's a flashlight shining in my face. So I quietly go outside and I sneak around the corner under the trees and look up, and there is a man standing on the roof of the building across the street, shining his flashlight into my living room. So I step out into the street where he can see me, and I look up, and he turns off the flashlight. And at that moment, almost as though I had called them, a police car comes around the corner to see a black woman standing in the middle of the street at 11:45 at night in an affluent community. A situation that could have been fatal to me in the United States. The man on the roof disappeared, of course, and I could hear myself sounding crazy as I described factually in Spanglish what happened. They gave me their business card and pulled off. First thing the next morning, I called my upstairs neighbors. They had lived there for 5 years, and asked them about this man. And she said, oh yeah, that's the adult son of the woman that lives in that building. He's a peeper. Just scream at him and he'll go away. I had asked for a sign. I received it. The next morning, I got a notification from Cash App. It was September the 1st, and my ascendant had sent me my rent for both apartments. My stomach knotted. This had to be an investment. This money had to move me forward into the future and not try to preserve the past. So I took that blessing and spent the next 3 days handling my business. I had packed the entire house. I had men come over and remove the air conditioners, including all the plumbing and wiring, and pack them. I found a secure storage facility and rented a storage unit. I had movers come and pack up everything that was for PV and put it into storage, then come back, load their truck up for all things headed for Lyon. I even found somebody to take care of my plants. And now the owner could rent that place to somebody whose life was not dominated by uncertainty. Now I'm living in Lyon. I had spent nearly every dime of the Ascendant's blessing on the move and storage. My firm told me they had no work for me, And the only projected income I had, which was the balance of that case that had been assigned to me, I wouldn't get it until I finished the investigation. And even then, it was going to be for my Leon rent. My daughter sent me money for food and to buy a sofa to sit on. For the first time since this episode began, I felt myself approaching worry. On Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025, I got a notification from my U.S. bank. The Social Security Administration had wired thousands of dollars into my account. My benefits, retroactive to June 9th. I paid my rent. I called the Ascendant and said, "Thank you. I got it this month." I could sustain myself until the work started coming in again. I could start researching for a new apartment in Puerto Vallarta. But as it turns out, all I could do was research. It was Monday, September the 15th, and there was no money in my Mexican bank account. The wire transfer that I had processed on September 10th took the money out of my account, but it never showed up. Apparently, my money had disappeared into thin air. Join me for episode 7 of Journey to the Mountaintop, A Return to Purpose. Walk with me.